During the complete rebuild of my yellow Golf RSR, some people had some really strong feelings about a few modifications.
Just like Grease Monkey 69 said, this project was super cool until that idiot put air suspension on his car.
I also had a lot to say about it.
Taking what good things the factory did and making it worse.
Air ride. Scrape, scrape, scrape.
This guy.
Which brings us here. For a car on air ride doing what a car on air ride does best, sitting parked.
For a lot of people, air rides all show and no go. And while it for sure has its advantages, ultimately, it's just not for me.
So once everybody's done checking out the car, I'm gonna get it out of here, get back to the shop, and lose those bags. So our air suspension time has come to an end. And to replace those airbags, we are installing coilovers. So these are brand new coilovers from Koni, adjustable rebound, adjustable camber up front, and of course, we got adjustable ride height. So we're gonna be able to get these things permanently dialed in. No more psst, 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 psst. Also, I like to believe that Koni made these springs yellow to match my car. They definitely didn't, but that's what I'm gonna believe. So we gotta get rid of all that air ride, all that hard work John and I did, dunzo. But the very first thing I gotta do is let all the air out of the system. So I guess this is as aired out as this car ever has been or will be. That's close enough. We'll still have a little bit of pressure in the tank, but that's not a big deal. It's pretty low PSI. So our next move, all of this is gonna have to come out of the trunk. And I also found out that our tank came unbolted, so that's fun. This has just been dangling and jangling, so let's go. Okay, that's the main components, but we still got hoses, we still got wiring, that all needs to come out. When we did this, I tried real hard to make sure everything looked nice and neat. The unfortunate side effect of that is when you're taking it back out, you get extra work for yourself. So I'm gonna have to take a bunch of interior trim panels out to get some wiring that belongs to the air ride out of the car. The other thing I took pretty serious was not making any permanent alterations to the car. So even these hoses here that go to all four corners of the car, they run right through this little grommet that I hollowed out. The first one is always the hardest one to get out. Okay, so you're probably wondering, Charles, you spent all that time, all that money, because air ride's expensive, just to a few months later pull it all out of your car. Was air ride really that bad, or are you just a doofus? Well, the second part is definitely true, but it's better than I expected it to be. Had I worked a little bit harder to get my system right, I think this kit would actually be pretty darn good. However, the extra anxiety about air ride, it's just not for me. Every time I drove the car, I was constantly worried, is the pressure in the bag enough? Is my ride height wrong? Did a bag blow out? Do I have a leak? All those things piled on. I just think it's not for me. I really think going with a solid set of coilovers is much more my vibe, my style, and I think I'll end up happier. All right, time to get the wheels and tires off. Now, this next part is going to be basically just like we're replacing any old suspension any old day. Along the way, I'm gonna point out a couple of things on this air ride kit that you really wanna make sure you know, as well as some things that I could have done to this kit to probably make this whole overall thing have functioned better. All right, wheel and tire off, and if you'll notice, we were proper stancy boys. Look at this, dirt nasty low. Now, the fitment with these wheels and tires was actually pretty good. However, that required a 25mm spacer on the back. So once we get our suspension dialed in, I have a wheel and tire surprise. Leave it to Paul to sell the Hot Boy wheel spacers. No Paul install option on those. Before I get these bags out, I'm gonna give the reminder to you as much as I'm gonna give the reminder to myself. Let's take the ride height sensor out first. If you don't take it out first, you're gonna forget. We can just let it dangle right here because it's not really gonna be in our way. Also, you may be wondering if I'm gonna replace all the suspension bolts because we're on like U6 now at this point. I'm not going to. Technically, they are one-time use. Technically, I don't have to do it. All right, so here's our bag, right? It sits, this piece sits right in the cup right here. If we were to take this and put a spacer underneath it, I would have been able to have the back of the car higher at a lower pressure inside the bag. Also looks like we got a little impact. I bet you that's from the sway bar end link. When I said I was worried about introducing failure points, this is what I was talking about. Here, is our bag in relation to our spring. Certain kits have different adjustment lengths. This is roughly as high as the bag would go. This is about halfway of our adjustment. So we're gonna be able to get the car a little bit higher up, and we might start probably in the middle. I don't know, if you don't care how your car drives, spin it all the way like that, slammed. Dirt nasty low. Either one of those, all the way up or all the way down, you're probably gonna get the worst performance out of a set of coilovers. Somewhere in the middle, generally where you wanna be. Also, we have a set screw right here that locks the collar, prevents it from turning. I'm gonna make sure we face this out so that if we need to make any ride height adjustments, I don't have to chase where that little set screw went. Follow the repair manual and instructions for the kit that you're using. If you're using these, this is how I'm putting mine in. The other thing we have to take off of here is going to be the canceller for dynamic chassis control. This fools the computer into thinking you still have a factory shock absorber plugged in, even when you don't. Looks like somebody did a bad job flush cutting that zip tie. We'll blame Paul for that one. I do have to unbolt some of the wheelhouse liner for this. When you're doing the passenger side on a Golf R, probably on GTI too, you have the leak detection pump you have to manage around. Now, this guy comes all the way out. Now, the mistake I made, I meant to break this collar loose so we could spin this shock absorber back down to where it was. So now we gotta take it over to the vise. Something we never did was mess around with the damping adjustment on these things. That could have been another spot where we improved the ride quality of these. Okay, next up we gotta put this guy. This is our little top hat. There is a bushing in here, so if your car has 1,000,000 miles on it, you might wanna replace this guy. You know I don't love drilling things out, but we need to open that hole up to about 12 mil. It's easy when it's aluminum, even with a crusty old drill bit. Will she fit? Yes. Perfect. Okay, let's tighten it down, put it back in. Up here at the top, this little tab right here, that's for our adjustment. The little adjuster, you put it on there, rotate it. What I usually do with these at first is I try to set it in the middle. So I'll turn it all the way one way, count my turns back the other way till it stops, roughly center it. It's probably not exactly, but it's really close. Once we get it up in the car, it's gonna be pretty tricky to adjust, but I'm hopeful that just keeping it centered will get us close. Now, if your car's on stock suspension and you're putting coilovers on it, before you take anything off, take some measurements. The instruction manual on these Conies actually has some points that they recommend you taking measurements from, which is great. However, if you don't have that or you can't measure in those ways, as long as it's a fixed location, it doesn't really matter where you measure. But if you take the before measurement, you can take the after measurement and make sure those all kind of line up with your whole suspension. By the way, if you're not working on a lift and you don't have the ability to use one of these screw jacks, your just regular floor jack up underneath this control arm, that works really, really well too. This is actually a toe adjustment eccentric bolt. If you're not planning on getting an alignment afterwards, see how I made this blue mark right here? You just wanna make sure that lines up. If you wanna maximize and get the absolute best out of your coilovers, you should also do a corner balance, which we haven't talked about in a really long time, but we are gonna corner balance this car, so you'll see what that looks like in a little while. That's why I mark it, just in case I gotta put it back to where it came from. For the most part, the front's a little bit more challenging than the back, just a little bit more work. Normally, I unbolt the brake caliper and I just kind of hang it, and then I take the rotor, the hub, the knuckle, and the shock absorber, all of that out at one time. I'm not sure I'm gonna do that for this one because this is enormous. We might just start taking stuff off that I know I have to take off, kind of see how it goes from there. I just took a ratchet strap and hooked it to this control arm. That's just gonna pull it down a little bit to keep it out of the way. The other thing is, I swapped over the RS3 brake ducts from that wrecked RS3 over to my Golf. You can add these to any MQB car, and you don't have to buy the Audi zip ties. You could just get some big old chunky zip ties from Amazon. I went ahead and made the call to just remove the whole hub, rotor, as well as the airbag assembly. And I'm gonna take the link off with me and leave it on the airbag because it's part of that kit. I'm just gonna swing the caliper over here and hook it. If you do this, just make sure that you don't have a bunch of tension on the brake line, because you can cause a brake fluid leak. Okay, all that leaves is the 3 bolts up on the top. I'm gonna get those, then I'm gonna be able to remove this whole entire thing. Get them out of there. Oh, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, I'm caught. There we go. Whew. This seems like an absurd amount to do, but I'm telling you, it makes doing shock absorbers on MQB cars and even older so much easier. I feel like I got lucky that didn't rip my hand off. be able to just wiggle this guy out. And we're gonna have to clamp it in the vise probably to adjust this one, but that's a problem for not right now. So here's a little height comparison. Airbag, this is the piece that mounts up underneath the 3 bolts that I took out under the cowl. Same thing on this one. We adjusted this. John and I did it once when he was here, and then I did it again. So what's that, probably another inch? Unreal. During the video that John and I did, I trashed air ride left and right, up, down, sideways. And apparently a lot of you guys agree, because if you go back and read the comments of it, it was just streams of how stupid I am for putting air ride in it. But it really did deliver exactly what I wanted. This was all about learning for myself, about installing air ride, about driving a car with air ride. And at the end of the day, I just don't think it's for me. I think these coilovers are gonna be awesome, and really, not just because of the color either, fit this build a little bit more appropriately. I'll probably be somewhere halfway, just like we did with the back. But also, see this little plastic disc right here? This is actually meant to help tune the bump stop. So leave this in. Coney hit a home run on this part right here. See how this is labeled inside? If you don't put it in that way, this gets all twisted and you're gonna end up with suspension binding. This equivalent piece of the factory shock absorber setup, common failure. You really gotta make sure you pay attention and get this on right. This part kind of sucks because you're having to juggle this big heavy contraption. Just be real careful. I'm gonna try and not ding up my body kit. Oh, I got it, yes. Whew. All you gotta do is get one nut. That's it. Then you can go back and work through and get everything dialed in. So I do actually though now have to find some sway bar end links. The ones that were attached to it are actually from the airbag kit. So I'm pretty sure I have some 0341 ones floating around. I'm also gonna do that exact same thing for the right side of the car. If anything goes weird, I'll grab the camera and let you know. So let's just cross our fingers it does fine. Okay, our nuts and bolts of our suspension, done. Now we get to do something super fun, and that's put the wheels on. This is going to give us an idea of our ride height. Once we have it on the ground, we'll know, do we need to go up? Do we need to go down? Are we pretty happy with where it is? If we're happy with where it is, we still have a bunch of work to do because we wanna make sure it's not just okay, we wanna make sure it's right. Unless you've spun your coilovers all the way to the bottom, then it doesn't matter. Just go Johnny Race Car yourself. It's gonna handle really bad. Okay, that's down. Not bad. This looks really cool, but remember there's that fiberglass wheel liner piece for the body kit that's like right here. Okay, our front actually looks pretty good, but just like with the back, I'm gonna bring it up a little bit to make sure that we have plenty of room for our suspension to move up and down, which means cars coming up and we can actually access these adjustment collars with the wheels on. So we don't have to take the wheels back off or anything like that, which is happy Charles. I'm going to rotate our collar, I think 4 turns down. So I'm gonna put a tiny mark right where the set screw is. I'm gonna do the same thing for the front, and then we're gonna see how it looks. Okay, I think that looks real good. That also gives us a little bit of flexibility if the overall diameter of our 19s is a little bit more. I'm happy with that. Now, if you're just trying to be dirt nasty low, you're done. Go drive it, enjoy your car. I actually think taking the next step, which I'm gonna show you in a second, is worth every bit of the time and energy to do because it's going to be a much better performing suspension than if you just eyeball it and send it from here. So here's how to not be Johnny Race Car dirt nasty low. We gotta take some measurements. Tape measure, it's okay. I like a pair of calipers. These are probably like 15 bucks from Harbor Freight. The important thing is that you take your measurement from a fixed point that exists on the left side and the right side. In the Coney instructions for these coilovers, they give you some places to measure, but I usually just kind of pick my own spots because a lot of times it's like measure from the center of the hole. Well, how do you know you're at the center of the hole? That's a good question. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure from right here, which is the mount for the sway bar, up to the bottom of the collar for our coilovers. I'm gonna lock the caliper in place, then I'm gonna go to the other side and take the same measurement. And if it's not the same, we'll adjust it till it is. Now, for most people, doing this is gonna be as much work as you need to do. If you're buying the max speed Alibaba coilovers for $36, who cares? Slam it. But if you get a good set of coilovers, corner balancing is the proper way to get this done. But even if you're gonna take your car and get it corner balanced, which we'll show you in a couple minutes what that looks like, get this as close as you possibly can. Because remember, any adjustments that they make at the corner balancing shop, they're gonna charge you for it. So this will save you some money, even if you're gonna do the stage 5 corner balance. Okay, time to put the wheels on. 3, 2, 1. Okay, wheels are on. Now I gotta lower this thing and get all the rest of those electronics from the air ride out of the car. Installing those coilovers took a few hours, taking our time. We spent days putting the air ride in, and here I am still taking stuff out from the air ride system. And after 9,000 years, we have finally, once and for all, for good, removed our air ride from this car. However, I still gotta put this entire car back together. Then after that, we can finally go get it aligned. All right, well, the guys get the car dialed up and ready to go. Let's talk about what's actually gonna happen. And here, order of operation is very, very important. First up is going to be mount and balance those 4 new tires on the wheels that we got. Now, unfortunately, the first set of tires that I got didn't actually fit. So I went ahead and ordered another set of tires that are a 30 profile instead of a 35 profile, and those fit absolutely perfect. The next thing we need to do is make sure that our ride height is exactly where we want it to be. We did a ton of measuring at the shop, but as we look at it, my heart says we're gonna have to raise the back up just a little bit. It seems like 2 turns is gonna get us exactly where I want it to be. This is gonna make the car look a little bit better and also reduce the chances of rub on that back piece of fiberglass behind the body kit. Now that we have the ride height exactly where I want it and the car looks so good, it's time to do the basic alignment. Now, we're not doing anything crazy or fancy here with the alignment. We're going to get pretty close to our factory settings for rear camber, rear toe, front camber, and front toe. This car doesn't have any caster adjustment at all. If you're doing a dedicated track car or like a proper race car alignment, your specs are gonna vary. There's also a lot of information, some good, some bad, about what you should align your car to. It's super dependent on your goals and the platform. So if a race car alignment is what you're trying to get, take it to a place that does race car alignments, they'll be able to get it dialed in for exactly what you're trying to achieve. Our wheels and tires are on, our car's at the right ride height, it's properly aligned. Now it's time to get it on the scales and do the actual corner balance. 1, you need to have adjustable sway bar end links. This is also a good mod if you're lowering your car anyway, so put it on the list of things to buy. 2, when it's on the scales, you need to have each sway bar disconnected so that you're not loading up the car unnecessarily. 3, without actually taking things out of the car and physically moving them, you can't really move weight around the vehicle. And I'm not gonna be stripping the interior out of this car, so our weight is what it is. You also wanna make sure you're taking into account the weight of the driver. Here you can see the car on the scales without me in the car, and look what happens when I get in the car. With that done, all we really have left is to set up our adjustable sway bar end links, and we're done. Now, we finally get to jump behind the wheel and test out these brand new coilovers. Okay, not only does this car look awesome with the new wheels and the proper ride height, but it drives so good. These coilovers are excellent. But let me show you what might be my favorite part. I have got my trunk back How amazing. So that's it from here. I got one more thing I gotta do. That's pass the keys off to our man Juan, because he's got a little bit of work to do. And the next time you see this car is gonna be at SEMA.